It's the 50th episode, and none of these are pronounced Ninja Gaiden. Hi, my name is Joe. This is Same Name Different Game, but this isn't just any episode of Same Name Different Game. This is the 50th episode of Same Name Different Game. And because of that, we are going to cover something that I've wanted to cover for a long time: Ninja Gaiden. Every one of them. Every game with the simple title Ninja Gaiden is getting covered in this episode. Some versions are ports of others, some are completely unique entries, some are reboots of the series, but they will all be covered here. Now before we get to any of that, let's get started, like we always do, with a little history. Ninja Gaiden is one of, if not the most well-known franchise from Tecmo. Tecmo began life in Japan in 1967 as Tekan, a company that dealt in building maintenance and cleaning equipment, believe it or not. In 1969, they entered the amusement business, and in 1981, they released their first arcade video game, Pleiades. It was, of course, a Space Invaders style shooter. Well, I guess it could have been a Pac-Man style maze chase, but it was certainly going to be one or the other in 1981. In 1986, they changed their name from Tekan to Tecmo and began releasing games on the Famicom, the Japanese NES. Starting with Mighty Bomb Jack, a sort of sequel, sort of port to their arcade title, Bomb Jack. And in 1988, they tasked two separate teams to create a ninja game, one for the arcade and one for the NES, as Yoshihito Kakihara, the president of Tecmo, heard that ninjas were becoming a cool fad in the West. According to a Hardcore Gaming 101 interview with Masato Kato, who worked on all three of the NES trilogy, the teams were just told, make a ninja game, but other than that, they could do whatever they wanted. So these titles were developed concurrently. Now, according to the Tecmo Koei website, the Ninja Gaiden arcade game came out in 1988. We don't know the exact date because, as I've said numerous times, arcade games are very hard to pin down when it comes to their release dates, but we know the Famicom version of the eventual NES Classic came out in Japan in December of 1988, so it stands to reason that the arcade version hit first. So that is the version that we will be covering first. The first of, how many games did I sign on to do here? Let's see here. Okay. Ninja Gaiden was on. Okay. Okay. Well, I am going to need some help.
Hey man, I'll help.
Hey everyone, it's Eric from Game vs. Game.
That's the name they gave me.
Wow. Cool. That's super cool. I think I have the arcade version well in hand, but hang out because I will definitely need you later.
No problem.
Known as Ninja Ryukenden in Japan, as all of the games we're going to talk about today are, this game was released in the US as Ninja Gaiden, and it's kind of a lame Double Dragon clone. You take control of an unnamed ninja in this game, though retroactively I guess it's Ryu Hayabusa, on a quest to, I don't know, clean up the streets, I guess. This game is actually incredibly light on story. So you and maybe a friend move from left to right, beating up wannabe Jason Voorhees, fat guys who swing tree trunks at you, and other ninjas in an attempt to rid the US of crime, I guess. This game is really good looking for a 1988 arcade game, and visually I'd say it holds up pretty well. If you remember anything from this game, it's probably the ninja smashing through the screen to start each level, or the best game over screen of all time. Yes, even better than Friday the 13th. But the gameplay is, You have one attack combo plus a jumping throw, which is very cool, but you end up spamming it a lot. You can't jump kick or anything, which is a bit frustrating, and you have no crowd control type move like the hurricane kick in Double Dragon. You can also hang from posts and kick forwards and backwards, which is fun and one of your more useful attacks. If you're playing on an actual arcade cabinet, this is done by hitting a button on the top of the joystick, which is a nifty feature. While your ninja walks around with his hand on the hilt of his sword at all times, you can only use it with a power-up. Now, this power-up really is the equalizer here, but it's very rare. And to make matters worse, you can't just break crates and oil drums open with your fists, but you have to knock or throw your enemies into them. It looks cool, and it's really satisfying, but when all's said and done, it turns collecting items, power-ups, health, into more of a hassle than anything. Add to that much of the game is auto-scrolling, and your ninja moves really slowly, both of which combine to make it difficult to avoid enemy attacks, and you really do have a game that's just middle of the road, even if you're a huge beat-em-up fan, which I am. Now, this game was ported to several computer formats.
Hey, I can help with that.
Can you? I mean, most of these computer formats were really much more popular in Britain. Like, do you know anything about, I don't know, the Amstrad CPC?
Yes. Yes.
That did not sound convincing.
Alright, you got me. I can't tell the difference between a BBC Micro and a ZX Spectrum.
It's ZX, actually.
What? That's what I just said.
Did you?
What, did you think I was going to say ZX like a putz? You know who calls it a ZX Spectrum? Murderers, that's who. You did think I was going to call it a ZX Spectrum, didn't you?
What? No.
Really?
Right, so anyways, I think we need a British person to cover this part, and fortunately I have found just the one, aficionado of all things microcomputer, Kim Justice.
Well, hello there. My name is Kim Justice, and I've been called upon to tell you all about Ninja Gaiden on the microcomputers, specifically the Commodore 64, the Commodore Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, and the ZX Spectrum. It was felt that a certain flair was needed for this section, or just the sort of foolish person who's willing to sit around for 10 minutes while the tape loads. Anyway, all 4 of the microcomputer versions of Ninja Gaiden were made by the almighty Ocean Software, and they're all based off of the original arcade beat-em-up. It should also be noted that, well, we didn't really like ninjas in Europe at the time because, they've thrown Death Stars and used things like swords and nunchakus. Nobody wants little Johnny Cartwright to start dressing up, flinging blocks of wood around and hitting Auntie Gladys in the eyeball. And so these games, and indeed almost all versions of Ninja Gaiden, were called Shadow Warriors over here, with the exception of the Master System game and the later reboots. Anyway, let us begin. Now, the odd thing about these micro-conversions is that for once, the more powerful systems are actually the worst. The Amiga version easily has the best graphics, or at least the ones that are most likely arcade version, but the control was jerky. Very jerky, to the point where it's really hard to even start hitting something. For all these conversions, you generally just hold the fire button to attack, which kind of works in a couple of them, but really doesn't in others. Here it just seems like Ryu Hayabusa goes crazy and you don't hit anything. The throws do work half of the time, but on the whole this one is maddening to play. It's also the only conversion with in-game music, although that comes at the cost of sound effects. On the whole, not good at all. The C64 version is even worse. The best thing about it is the title screen song that's composed by Matt Furniss, but there's no in-game music to speak of, and the controls are, if anything, worse than the Amiga version. Also, as an added bonus, while all the other versions of this game come with a few credits to at least give you a fighting chance of completing the game, this version has none. If you were able to beat this, then damn, you must have been a frickin' Jedi. Either that or you were using a trainer. This version is horrible, easily the worst of them. It's also the worst graphically too. All the sprites just look like a mess, which is really disappointing for the Commodore 64. Pretty awful. However, the less powerful the system, weirdly the better the game. Next up is the Amstrad CPC 128. Now while this may have had more memory than the C64, it didn't have any graphical hardware to speak of, so generally you expect less of it. However, this conversion's alright. At the very least, your attacks have a good chance of hitting something, and you can start using strategy and thinking of the best ways to combine your regular flurries and jump-in throws. The big issue with this version is the total lack of scrolling. It's a flick-screen beat-em-up, which is quite unusual to say the least. But the game is playable, of that there is no doubt, and so while it is not strong graphically, it's definitely better than the Amiga and C64 games. But as for my favourite, well, if you know me already, you know how much I love the ZX Spectrum. And yes, this is the version that I played as a kid, but even with that potential bias, it's easily the best version. Sure, there's no music or anything aside from the title screen, but there's nicely drawn big sprites, a nice amount of colour on the sprites too, complete with black strokes around everything to deal with the Specky's signature colour clash. Most importantly though, the control is as good if not better than the Amstrad version, and it also scrolls. It's easily the fastest version of the game on microcomputers. The only weird thing that I can think of is that in both this and the Amstrad version, you only ever fight 2 enemies at a time. The other enemies are there, but they stand idle until other goons are beaten down. That's a small compromise though for a pretty good beat 'em up that's also one of the more graphically impressive Specky games. Very nice for the system. And so the Specky version is easily the winner here. The Amstrad comes second, there's a big gap between that and the Amiga, and the C64 brings up the rear. Now before I go, one thing you might ask, did any microcomputer get a conversion of the other Ninja Gaiden? As in the NES one? Well, yes and no. While Ninja Gaiden 1's the subject here, there's not going to be that many chances to mention the Amiga version of Ninja Gaiden 2, The Dark Sword of Chaos by GameTech. Yeah, the same people who are mostly famous for versions of Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune and the like. Why is it worth mentioning? Well, because, good lord, it's one of the worst conversions known to man. This is a game where you push up and right to attack, believe it or not, which makes as much sense as you think it does. Seeing as most Amiga games were only made for one button, I guess that deals with the frequent issue of using up to jump, but it does so in about the worst way possible. The game is pretty close to unplayable. I can barely get past the first boss without cheating. It speaks for itself, to be honest. Anywho, that's about all there is to show for Ninja Gaiden on the micros. Hope you enjoyed it. For now though, I will leave you in Joe's capable hands. So long!
Wow, thanks a lot, Kim. That is a lot of Ninja Gaiden, or Shadow Warriors, or whatever. Anyways, there's actually one more port of the arcade game, released in 1991, the same year as Ninja Gaiden 3 on the NES. It's Ninja Gaiden for the Atari Lynx.
Ooh, I know all about the Lynx.
Dude, no you don't. Don't even try.
I know. I always wanted a Lynx, but I guess my parents only loved me a Game Boy's worth. I don't know anything about it.
Well, to be fair, I know next to nothing about it, but I've played this game. It's actually a fairly faithful port done by Blue Sky, best known as the developers of Vector Man on the Genesis, and published by Atari. It may actually be the best of all of the ports of the arcade game, though judging by what Kim said, that might not be the highest praise. Also, the soundtrack here is awful. I had to use an emulator to play it since I don't have a Lynx, so that might be part of it, but man alive, this is almost as bad as the Adventures of Batman and Robin on the Game Gear. Still, the game plays reasonably faithfully, including the sword power-up, the hanging from signs, and all that stuff. It is, however, missing 2 stages. And, I mean, it's on the Atari Lynx. Unless you're a Lynx fanatic, no judgment, there really isn't much reason to go back to this one. And that covers the arcade version and all of its ports, so that means it's time to get to the NES version.
Ooh, I do actually know a lot about this one.
Look, dude, I appreciate it, but if there's one game on this episode that I do not need any help covering, it's this one.
But I beat it!
Do I even need to talk about this game? It's one of the best on the NES, a legendary title, commonly regarded as one of the hardest games ever made while still remaining fun. This game left such an impression on me, I still remember the first time I rented it as a 6-year-old. This game features a strong story unlike the arcade. Well, strong by the standards of the era. The game has a lot more plot than any other non-RPG of that time, at least that I can think of. Ken Hayabusa is killed in a duel, and his son Ryu finds a letter telling him that if Ken doesn't return, he's to go to the United States and find an archaeologist named Walter Smith. Ryu heads out with a thirst for revenge. This game features 6 stages as Ryu unravels what happened to his father and a plot involving demon worshippers, the CIA, and a mysterious temple in South America. Each level is a new set of expertly designed action platforming challenges. They're all unique and they look great. And the soundtrack. Oh me, oh my, that soundtrack. One of the best on the NES, easily on par with other heavy hitters like Mega Man 2, Double Dragon, and Castlevania 3. Keiji Yamagishi really just killed it with these tunes. Gameplay-wise, there's a reason a game this frustrating keeps players coming back time and time again. The controls are super responsive. The enemy designs are cool, ranging from ninjas to boxers to Jason Voorhees. Again? What is up with this fixation on Jason Voorhees? They're satisfying to kill, and oh, those sub-weapons are awesome. Speaking of that, this game is clearly inspired by Castlevania. You can just look at the life bar. Look at these power-ups being in floating objects around the stage. And said sub-weapons are fired by pressing up and B, just like Konami's classic. Some are even basically the same. The small shuriken is like the dagger, the windmill star is like the cross, and the art of the fire wheel is kinda like the axe in that it travels up. But where Ninja Gaiden differentiates itself is with Ryu's mobility. He's much more agile than any of the 8-bit Belmonts, and that's why I'd take Ninja Gaiden over at least Castlevania 1 or 2. Maybe even over all 3 of them, but that's a close call. I like Dracula's Curse a lot. At any rate, this game is wonderful, but it earns its reputation as one of the toughest on the platform. Constantly respawning enemies, tricky platforming, and a brutal gauntlet of 3 final bosses where losing to any one of them sends you all the way back to the very beginning of the final stage. That all makes for some incredibly frustrating gameplay. Add to that, you lose your sub-weapon not only when dying, but when starting a new stage, and possibly more importantly, when defeating one of those 3 final bosses. And with that, the extra frustration begins to creep in. I will say though, it is somewhat mitigated when you realize how borderline broken the jump and slash sub-weapon is. I mean, just look at how this attack makes short work of any boss in the game, including the final ones. And I would feel bad about that, but then I remember how the game stacks the deck against the player for 99% of it, and I feel fine. Plus, I had to replay the entire stage 3 times to get the jump and slash back to use it on the next boss form, so whatever. So yeah, you all know this game, but what you might not know is that in 1992, a year after the NES trilogy wrapped up, published by Hudson, developed by Hudson Era, a Hong Kong-based studio, Ninja Ryu Kenden hit the PC Engine, or the Japanese TurboGrafx 16. Eric?
PC Engine. So is that where you put an engine on your PC? That can't be right. I don't know anything about it.
Okay, well, fair enough. That makes sense because, like I said, this is a Japan-only release. It never hit the American TurboGrafx, and that's because, as I discussed back in the Die Hard episode, American support for the TurboGrafx was not very good. Die Hard for the PC Engine never hit the US for a variety of reasons. In a 2014 interview with Christian Nutt for Gamasutra, former NEC employee Carol Balcom said NEC decided to create a brand new business in the United States and do it all, to distribute the hardware and the software. Since the US rights to Die Hard video games were sewn up by Activision, NEC would have had to shell out to sub-license, what with them wanting to distribute everything themselves. And this also would have been a problem. In the same feature from Gamasutra, ex-NECer John Brandsetter said, if we gave Japan a lineup, a list of what we thought would be the killer lineup for Christmas, we maybe got one out of the 10 or 15 titles we asked for. Okay, well, so to be fair, I should point out that by this point, the system was in the hands of TTI in the US, and they probably just straight up couldn't afford to license Ninja Gaiden from Tecmo. Still, it seems like a US release may have at least been considered because you can play the game in English. And the translation was clearly done from scratch because it's not the same as the NES one. My favorite part of that is, for whatever reason, the Jakio is now Devil Doer. I am not making this up. For the most part, the game is the same as the NES. Enemy and power-up placement seems to be identical near as I can tell. The stage designs are the same. I mean, I'd love to tell you that this is the version to seek out, that it's a pumped-up version of the NES original, but I can't do that. For starters, the soundtrack is absolutely abysmal. For whatever reason, everything except the act starting theme and the death jingle is a new song, and none of them even touch the NES soundtrack. In fact, not one of these songs is even kind of memorable, which is sad because making this episode I was humming tracks from the NES game for days. But that's not where the problems end. They added parallax scrolling to some stages, but it scrolls backwards. It moves in the same direction you do instead of opposite you to create the illusion of movement. And it stutters really badly to boot. Plus they nerfed the jump and slash. See what happens when you try it on a boss in this version? Seemingly to make up for that, they made the windmill star go through bosses, while it stops after hitting a boss in the NES version. Now this means that you can score multiple hits on them, but that doesn't come close to actually making up for the lack of the jump and slash trick. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the couple of things this game actually does improve though. First of all, there's a code that will give you 99 sub-weapon energy. Second of all, when you finish a stage, die, or even continue, you get to keep your sub-weapon. This also translates to the final boss gauntlet, which is very useful. Finally, in the NES game, when you get an invincible fire wheel power-up, it takes the place of your sub-weapon. But in the PC Engine version, you get to keep your sub-weapon and even use it while you're invincible. Sadly, though, that power-up has a problem of its own in this version. So yeah, sad to say this isn't some amazing hidden gem of a port, but that's probably for the best considering that it currently goes for about 10 times what the NES version goes for, so you're probably best off just avoiding it. But there is one more port of the NES Ninja Gaiden.
Oh yeah, part of that really expensive Super Nintendo collection, right? Wasn't there a Genesis version too?
Yes, true, but that is not a port of the NES game.
That's cool. I know
exactly who can help us out with this. Me too.
I'm Nintendo.
And I'm Sega. This is Console Wars!
Since you don't have a game, I'm gonna have my victory beer.
Whoa! I have an unreleased game that I'm gonna talk about.
Alright, let's have this normal beer then.
The Genesis version was developed by a company called Opus and was going to be published by Sega, but it was cancelled before completion. There is a ROM out there of a beta version though, and that's how we played it.
Well, my games are supported the NES version. There's really only a third of a game coming off the Ninja Gaiden trilogy cartridge.
Whoa! But it's not just a port. The game changes things, like the soundtrack. The instrumentation is really weird. Like that one song suddenly has a bunch of xylophone.
So what? Xylophones are cool.
And the graphics are barely improved. This is a far cry from Super Mario All-Stars. Also, the buttons are mapped like it's an NES controller, but it's not an NES controller. The buttons are on an angle, as opposed to the NES controller, where they're right next to each other. This makes it hard to control, and you can't remap them. And rather than having one of the other two face buttons to your sub-weapon, which makes sense, you still have to hit up and B. Lame.
Oh yeah? Well, at least it keeps the jump and slash strong, unlike the PC Engine version.
So, I'm not arguing with you about the PC Engine version.
Yeah? Well, you'd be better off if we were. Have you played the Genesis version? Yeah, and it plays great. Well, it plays fine. I mean, it's not that bad. Oh, really? You want to talk about controls? Let's talk about controls.
When you press any direction in this game, you run on an angle. You can't run straight, left, right, up, or down.
Yeah, but...
And you only have one combo, a palm thrust punch kick. 3 hits.
And a special attack.
That barely works and costs you health to use. This game is trying to be the arcade game, which was already inferior to the NES, and can't even be as fun as that.
Okay, but it has this punk guy who's constantly giving Ryu the finger, and a hilariously bad English script.
That might make it amusing for like 10 seconds, but ultimately, it's a tedious waste of time. Sure, my game might be a barely upgraded version of the NES game that isn't even as good as the original version and is incredibly overpriced. But it's no contest when compared to the unreleased Genesis game. When it comes to Super Nintendo and Genesis, there's only one decent version of Ninja Gaiden, and that's for Super Nintendo.
Man, this game is bad. Guess it was unreleased for a reason.
Sorry, Sega. Didn't mean to set you up for failure like that.
But it was fun for me. Thanks, Joe. Time for that victory beer.
No problem, Nintendo, and thanks for taking one for the team, Sega. And that does it for the NES ports.
Whoa there, cowboy.
What?
I think you're forgetting something?
No.
It's in your pocket, and it vibrates.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, fine. I carry around an N64 Rumble Pack in my pocket at all times. But there's no N64 version of Ninja Gaiden.
What? No, I meant your phone.
Oh. Well. NES emulators on smartphones don't really...
No, not that dumb smartphone. Old school.
Oh. Geez, that's right. That happened. Do you want to help out with this one?
Who still has a phone that old?
Right. Well, I would really like to talk about this game, released in 2004 on a variety of old school mobile phones, and really serious thanks to Sam and Kurt from Hardcore Gaming 101 for trying to help me out with this, but I could not get this game to work at all. I have to go on secondhand accounts, which are that it was a somewhat faithful port of the NES title, but cropped to fit old school cell phone screens. The few reviews I could find from the time are fairly positive, keeping in mind that this was mobile gaming in the early 2000s, and that was a pretty sparse landscape, and what was available was often very bad. The game was broken into episodes, and only the first one came out on US cell phones. From what I understand, it's a little more than the first stage. The best I can tell you is that I remember playing games like Contra and Metal Gear on my old cell phone, and they were pretty rough. By all accounts, this was basically the same experience. Decent by the standards of the time, but absolutely nothing you'd want to play in an era of Candy Crush and Pokemon Go. Okay, well, now that we are actually done with all of the NES ports, let's go ahead and take a look at all those versions side by side, with the exception of the cell phone version. think the Super NES arguably looks best, but the NES sounds and plays best, for sure. Alright, well let's move on to the Sega published versions. Now, while that Genesis version did get cancelled, there were two that actually did get published by Sega. The first was in 1991 on the humble Game Gear.
Hey, now I do actually know a thing or two about the Game Gear one.
Oh, hey Raj. Yeah, I think I can handle this one. Sure.
Whoa, what's going on?
Okay, look Eric, this game is not well known, correct?
I guess not.
And it's not a port of another game, right? It's totally unique.
Well, no, but...
Well, then I guess that makes this an obscure, old game. So who better to cover it than me, the host of Obscure Old Games?
Fine, puppet.
Ninja Gaiden for the Game Gear was developed by Japan System House, later known as Viox, and released by Sega in Japan, Europe, and the US in 1991. Japan System House seems to have made their name largely on the Game Gear, but they also worked on games like Mega Man 2, that's Roman numeral 2, for the Game Boy, and the later Kid Nicky games on the Famicom. But in this case, it seems their Game Gear experience paid off, because this is one of the best action titles on the system. It's also the easiest Ninja Gaiden game with only 5 short stages. It can be beaten in about a half hour by any competent player, and even a beginner can probably take it down in 45 minutes. But that don't make it bad, just a departure for the series. I mean, these games are known for difficulty, ain't it? It's got some pretty normal stages for this type of game, but it's also got some fun unique ones, including a cool stage that is entirely Ryu scaling the side of a building, and the final stage has some fun and unique platforming elements. It also has 3 new weapons. The throwing star is here, as is the invincible fire wheel, but exclusive to this installment is the wave, which goes straight up, the ring, which homes in on the nearest enemy, and the scatter bomb, a 3-way spread attack. What's weird here is that to use items you press down in the attack button, not up in the attack button, and that takes some getting used to, let me tell ya. The game is not without its flaws though. It's easy, like I said, but the way hits work is really silly and kinda broken. If you get hit by most enemies, they can stun lock you and basically kill you in one hit because you don't really have any invincibility time after taking a hit. Also, the story is different from the arcade and NES, and it's real goofy. An evil guy wants the Hayabusa family dragon sword so that he can use its power to start some kind of global war. Because reasons? It's really never explained. I mean, it's just evil guy does evil stuff because it's evil, with really none of the admittedly limited intrigue of the NES version. And yeah, that's about it. It's a good game. If you're a fan of the series or a fan of the hardware, I would highly recommend you check this one out. Alright Joe, it's your show again. Alright, thanks Raj, I appreciate it. Dude, why do you do that? It's all zoomed in. Woo, that's better. So there is one more Sega published effort.
For the Master System, right?
Yep, you got it. And what's interesting about this is, unlike games like Master of Darkness or Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or any number of other examples I could name, this is actually a completely unique game, not just the Game Gear version with a bigger resolution. Unfortunately, it's a European exclusive.
So what you'll need here is...
Another Brit? Yes, good call. That's what I was thinking too. Fortunately, Lee from Pughoof Gaming is an Englishman who can tell us all about Ninja Gaiden for the Sega Master System. Take it away, Lee.
For years, PAL regions were treated fairly poorly by games publishers, missing out on many games that were localised in English in North America but never made it out to PAL console owners. But there were some rare examples where Europe have actually had games released that were never localised in other countries. The Master System was extremely popular in places like Europe and Brazil, a very different situation to the rest of the world who prefer the Nintendo Entertainment System, and as a result several Master System games were exclusive to the PAL market, one of those being the 1992 release of Ninja Gaiden. This release wasn't developed by Tecmo but rather outsourced by Sega to Sims Co Limited, a developer that has programmed games for all of Sega's consoles. And despite the series usually being localised as Shadow Warriors, somehow this power-only game remained unscathed, a rarity considering the mass censorship of anything relating to ninjas here in the United Kingdom. Separated from the main Ninja Gaiden canon, this side story, a Ninja Gaiden if you will, puts you once again into the snug-fitting pyjamas of Ryu Hayabusa, kicking ass and taking names to avenge the massacre of his village and the theft of the sacred Bushido Scroll, an artifact of great power and importance. Anyone who's played the main Ninja Gaiden trilogy will feel right at home, as Ryu controls relatively similar to other outings, with even the combat being identical. It does an excellent job at making you feel like a ninja, and there's a great flow to traversing levels using all of Ryu's abilities to avoid enemies, jump across platforms and climb walls. This time around our hero can now wall jump, which works so well it makes you wonder what other versions of Ninja Gaiden would be with the ability. It's also not quite as difficult as other versions of the game, and while it does have some of the unfair elements that the series is known for, such as respawning enemies and how they tend to spawn in the worst possible positions imaginable, here it's a little bit more forgiving than you'd expect from your average Ninja Gaiden game. Visually, it is a very impressive release indeed. The colourful graphics and redesigned sprites certainly separate it from the other versions with some great looking levels, and overall it compares favourably to the Nintendo Entertainment System's releases, although the bosses are rather underwhelming in stature. The music is also pretty damn great, with in-level tracks giving that sense of action and urgency you need in this type of game, while also calming things down during the cinematics that play in between levels. But this version isn't perfect though. As well as the aforementioned difficulty issues stemming from bad game design, the end of level bosses are very underwhelming. Not only do they not look intimidating at all, but many of them are easily dispatched by spamming the attack button and hoping they die before you do. But even with those issues, this is not only a really good Ninja Gaiden game, it's also a very good action game in general. Sims did a really great job of making a unique version of Ninja Gaiden that the Master System can be proud of having, and it's just a real shame that, like many other great Master System games, its limited release kept it out of players' hands for so long. If you've exhausted every other game in the Ninja Gaiden series, then this one will pleasantly surprise you.
Thanks so much, Lee, and I agree with you. I love the Master System Ninja Gaiden, even if it isn't a patch on that classic NES trilogy. Whew, wow, we are getting into the home stretch here. In fact, we're really done with the true classics, the 2D versions of Ninja Gaiden.
Wait, but...
Yes, but as everybody knows, there was a 2004 revival.
Yes, however...
However, I never really got into it, so I can't really talk about it with much authority. If only we knew someone who specialized in original Xbox games.
Well, there's the Deli Popka, but...
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Hey, Popka, help us out.
Hey all, Dolly Popka here, and Joe has graciously invited me to be a part of his Ninja Gaiden episode on Same Name, Different Game to talk about the franchise's big revival on the big green, with 2004's Ninja Gaiden for the original Xbox, or as I like to call the game, the Devil's Catnip. Now, prior to the Xbox game, Ryu Hayabusa had kept busy as a fighter in Tecmo's Dead or Alive series, but game director Tomonobu Itagaki thought it would be a cool idea to bring Ryu back into the spotlight as he hadn't starred in his own game for quite a while, and man did he come back in style. Story-wise, Ninja Gaiden takes place before the NES trilogy, according to Itagaki, where we see Ryu infiltrating the fortress of the Shadow Clan to speak with Murai, leader of the clan and Ryu's uncle. During their conversation, Ayane, yep, from DOA, as it turns out this game also takes place before the first DOA, as both series are now connected, or something. Anyway, she busts in and tells Ryu that the Hayabusa village is being raided. Rushing back, Ryu sees the Shrine Maiden murdered by the hand of the greater fiend Doku, who has come to steal the Dark Dragon Blade, a sword of immense evil power that the clan was keeping safe from anyone trying to claim it. Ninja Gaiden games have always been known for their story, especially the NES games and their amazing cutscenes for the time. Well, I'm happy to say that the Xbox's version doesn't disappoint. Ninja Gaiden spins a fine revenge tale with that familiar taste of swordplay, ninjutsu, and supernatural sorcery all wrapped up in a modern package. Well, modern for the Xbox time. Now, Ninja Gaiden's gameplay has inspired many other games of its time, resulting in many copycats. But in the case of the Xbox version, Ryu took some notes from Dante and Kratos, as Ninja Gaiden is a third-person action-adventure in the vein of Devil May Cry and God of War respectively. You'll explore different areas, making your way to the city of Tyron, which serves as the hub world for the Vigor Empire. There, you branch out into other areas of the map, some having to be unlocked by solving puzzles, finding keys or items, or just hacking enemies to pieces. Controlling Ryu is like the game Othello, easy to learn but tough to master. You have 2 attack buttons, a light and heavy attack, and a block button. Combat is easy to pull off, but you'll quickly discover what Ninja Gaiden 04 is most famous for. It's frigging hard. The enemies are relentless in their quest to murderate you, so mastering combos and blocking and evading is essential to pull off those killer blows. Thankfully, Ryu has the abilities and weaponry to get the job done. You start off with his iconic dragon sword, but you'll acquire other types of weapons as well, like nunchucks and staffs, bows and arrows, shurikens, and more. You also learn Ninpo, which is Ryu's form of using magic. And of course, like any other game in this genre, all of your weapons can be upgraded at Muramasa's shop, along with purchasing other items in exchange for essences. You know, those colored orbs that enemies just tend to drop that refill your health, magic, and give you cash at the same time. Every good action game has them. Of course, being a ninja, Ryu has some sweet moves like wall running and jumping, pole swinging, and even running on water. And you'll need all of these moves to pull off the platforming sections Ninja Gaiden has to offer, especially when you're looking for golden scarabs. Collecting these scarabs and bringing them back to Muramasa will net you some sweet bonuses, including being able to unlock and play the NES games. If there's anything else, besides the hair-pulling difficulty, it's the camera that can annoy you. It tends to want to pick a fight with you in certain spots, making it unable to see. Plus, you can't pan the camera around, you only have a first-person mode. It kinda reminds me of Metal Gear Solid 3, how everything advanced in the game except the camera. Thankfully, like Metal Gear Solid 3, the camera eventually got fixed, but I'll get to that. Visually, Ninja Gaiden 04 is stunning, but coming from the Dead or Alive team, I'd expect nothing less. Character models are wonderfully designed, giving off that mixture of steampunk, ninja, and demonic styles, while the environments are nicely varied, though you do spend quite a bit of time in the hub world. Regardless, this game showed what the Big Green could be capable of. As far as audio goes, the music is a nice blend of rock and some slight techno here or there, with Eastern and European sounds thrown in, getting intense when Ryu enters combat. Voice acting? Well, it's there. Not amazing, but it's doable. Plus, if it really bothers you, you can switch it to the Japanese audio track.
Ah, the dragon sword. So your father is still in the sacred wilderness.
Yes. He has entrusted me with the sword while he continues his training.
Overall, Ninja Gaiden 04 is a tough game. Really tough. Really, really tough. But with smooth controls and fun gameplay, it's a game that makes you want to keep playing it over and over to master it, no matter how many times you die. Overall, it's a game worth picking up. Is what I would have said if Team Ninja hadn't released Ninja Gaiden Black a year later. Hailed as the definitive version, besides some graphical enhancements and slight story changes, Black adds all of the DLC from the 2 add-on packs from Xbox Live, as well as new missions, costumes, enemies, and a third-person camera. But don't worry, you can still switch between first and third-person cameras by clicking on the right analog stick. You can also unlock the Ninja Gaiden arcade game for collecting scarabs, but sadly it replaces the NES games, which is kind of a bummer. The difficulty has been revamped as well. Not only is there harder difficulties for those who just don't want to have hands anymore, there's now an easy difficulty called Ninja Dog. So yeah, Ninja Gaiden Black is the best version and the one to pick up. Unless you're a Sony guy, I mean, I guess you could get Ninja Gaiden Sigma or something. No, I'm not going to talk about that. But the original version of Ninja Gaiden's not bad either. Regardless of which one you want to pick up, they're both cheap to get and are 360 compatible, so you can't go wrong either way. So thanks, Joe, for bringing me aboard on your Ninja Gaiden episode. It was fun to talk about the series, or at least the Xbox version, and not lose my sanity completely. Back to you, buddy.
Thanks so much, Popka. I'm glad you were able to keep your sanity. Like I said, I never really got into this series. I played a little bit of Ninja Gaiden Sigma on the PS3, but never got all that far. I do know the series has a ton of fans, especially the first 2 entries in the modern series, so if that's something you're into, definitely check those out. And finally, that makes it time to give the...
No, it does not.
What? No, we're done. We talked about everything. We talked about the NES, we talked about the PC Engine, the arcade original, all those ports, all that stuff. We talked about the unreleased Genesis version. We even talked about the cell phone version. There's nothing left.
Oh, but there is.
My God.
My God is right, because let me tell you, this thing is awesome. Of course, all Tiger handhelds are, but I'm here to show you Ninja Gaiden Tiger Electronics handheld, and here it is. Nail-biting action? Check. Sweet soundtrack? Check. If this doesn't deserve the edge, I don't know what does. It's, I can't do this anymore. It's killing me inside. For real, it's everything you'd expect a Tiger handheld to be. Clumsy movement, ear-piercing beeps, and you can't tell if all the button mashing you're doing is actually doing anything worthwhile. I'll say this though, it seems like they did legitimately try. It's got a basic level structure with bosses at the end of each level. It introduces new enemies along the way, from the standard meat shield guys to jumpy ones. Some throw ninja stars, others only appear on the upper level. They've even included a couple different ninja arts as well. How you actually collect them though is clearly a well-guarded ancient ninja secret. For as notoriously lousy and cheap as these Tiger handhelds are, Ninja Gaiden is oddly expensive, running about $20 to $25 on average. Yeah, tough to recommend even as a curiosity, and apart from that, it's useless.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that really is every single version of Ninja Gaiden. We've done them all 17 of them. And being that there are 17, I can't really put them all up on the screen at once to compare them in any meaningful way from a perspective of graphics and sound. So I guess that makes it time to give the edge. And I will be honest, again, because there are so many, I'm not going to run these down individually as I have in a lot of episodes, but I will start by saying that the best of them is still the NES original for me. It's a stone cold classic, and that is very much for a reason. It's pretty cheap these days, and even if you can't get your hands on an original cart, it is available on the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS Virtual Console. So, I mean, check it out if you haven't ever played it for some reason. When we're talking about hidden gems and games that I would just sort of recommend, I would say the 2 Sega published versions that we talked about, the Master System and the Game Gear. Totally different games, both a lot of fun, highly recommended if you're looking for games of that style that you maybe haven't checked out before. And of course, again, as I said, I'm not a huge fan of the newer version, but a lot of people are, so if 3D based character action games that are incredibly difficult strike your fancy, I would recommend checking this one out, but I would also take the Dolly Popka's advice and not actually check out this particular version, but one of the later re-releases, either Ninja Gaiden Black, also on the original Xbox, or Ninja Gaiden Sigma on the PlayStation 3. And that does it. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I am incredibly grateful that you check out the stuff that I do here. And everybody who was in this episode is someone whose work I am a big fan of, which is why I asked them to be in this, and I am incredibly humbled that they agreed. So please check out all of their projects as well. Here's to 50 more episodes of this show, and we'll start on that road next month with episode 51. See you next time.
Like a ghost in the moonlight, the ninja warrior stalks his prey. Unseen, unheard, and unnoticed. Mission accomplished. The final battle begins. Ninja Gaiden for Nintendo from Tecmo. Coming soon, more hard-to-beat action. Tecmo Bad News Baseball.